Today is Saturday, July 27th, and I am here on Madeline Island along with Penny, and Robin is in Portland, and Lily's in Minneapolis, and Joanne is in Hamilton, Ontario. And today, our next in our continuing series of Transcendence is emotional transcendence, which is particularly appropriate, I believe, during these times, as many are feeling the wave after wave after wave of deep, deep, deep emotion coming up and releasing the emotions that have been abscessed within us and within the earth for for all those billions of lives that have been lived here. And so I'm really looking forward to this because I don't think you can study emotion too much. I think it's a very deep, deep, deep subject, especially with the Einsteinian definitions that I'm looking forward to. But before we do that, I have asked Robin if she would do an astrology update for us. I am finding those particularly wonderful and helpful and intriguing. So if you wouldn't mind to do that, Robin, I would love that.
It'd be my honor. And there's so much going on in the stars that I'm going to stick with just what's kind of happening right now and in the coming few weeks. And we're right in the middle of eclipse season, which I think I mentioned last month. But since we last met, there has been 2 of the 3 eclipses with 1 more to go. And the eclipse we had last Saturday was kind of the big one right at the solar eclipse. And it's a reminder of self-care, which Einstein and Barbara have been sharing with us for decades now. But this time is especially important. And I really liked how you mentioned, Barbara, the abscess is not only in us, but inside of the earth as well. And the third eclipse that's coming up is going to be a lunar eclipse, a full moon lunar eclipse on July the 5th. And that's going to be in Capricorn. And it's going to bring with it, the intensity of a full moon, where the intensity of a full moon. But being in 13 Capricorn, since we've had the eclipses in that Capricorn Cancer axis for about a year and a half. What this is going to do, this is kind of the final one, and it's the final release of what structures in our own lives are we ready to dismantle and let go of, and just really encouraging us to let them fall away. And that'll be again on July 5th. It's also going to be the rise of feminine energy, which we know has been on the rise in quite a few years, but it's going to be another reminder of that. And looking at what you want to keep, there'll be some things that you do want to keep in your structure, and really letting the rest fall away. No more hanging on. We've got about 6 months to wrap all this up. So these 3 eclipses will, whatever's been going on in your life during during this time from June 5th to July 5th, whatever things have come up for you, you've got about 6 months for them to be in final process. Then Venus went forward on Thursday. So it had been retrograde for about 40 days, which brought us whenever a planet is retrograde, which we have 5 to 6 planets retrograde right now. So we have a lot of retrograde going on, and it's a time of just reviewing, reflecting, restructuring, and change. Ironically, change begins with me. Nothing we know about in this circle, right? And so Venus had been retrograde for about 40 days, and it went forward on Thursday. But during its retrograde period, it gave us time to think about what's important to us, what do we value. And Mars moves into Aries today. So Venus was in the sign of Gemini for this whole, retrograde period, and now it's going to remain in Gemini till the end of July. And Mars is doing something unusual. It hasn't done this in, even one astrologer I was listening to looked back 120 years and hadn't found a previous occurrence of this, which was being in its sign for 7 months. Normally Mars will race through a sign, or even if we have a retrograde, it might be retrograding in and out of a sign, but it's going to be, moves into Aries this afternoon, and it's going to stay in Aries for 7 months. And it's at home there because Mars rules Aries. Now, it can bring up some intensity. And it's going to be having 3 passes of squares to the cluster that I've been talking about for months, which began in January in Capricorn. But what I don't want people to do is take this as a fear-based prediction on my part. I don't want to just say Mars equals war. Some very mundane astrologers might say that. But here's why I think it could be different this time. Partially what Lily just said. The tone is different. Well, Mars conjunct Neptune a few weeks back in Pisces. And the way I see the planets is they are beings of consciousness. And when they come together, it's almost like they mind meld and share some consciousness and have a little kiss and then go on, and they're different too. So I like to think of when Mars and Neptune conjuncted a few weeks back, we've had all this Venus retrograde, this rise of the divine feminine, and the tone is different. So as we go forward, Venus and Mars are going to be working together because Gemini and Aries are a harmonious aspect. And it's going to be important that the divine masculine and divine feminine work together, not just the way things used to be, which is, oh, we're just going to, bring out the warrior and go to war. I was listening to one astrologer that said, martial arts is really Mars and Venus. We've got the martial action, and we've got the arts, which is the proper use of working with the energy, like we're learning here in this circle, in this work with Einstein. How do we work with the energy? And so, right, yes, so the past couple of days and this morning too, Mars is about to leave, so it's at 29 degrees Pisces. And I think I talked last time about how the North and South Node have moved into 29 Gemini. And for the next 18 months, that's really going to be challenging us to sort of forget what we think we know, take the time to dive deeper and not just, oh, this is my belief and I'm going to share it, but really dive deep to find your truth. We're digging deeper, allowing more information to come up. And with this square the past few days, I don't know if anyone else has been feeling it, but I have, which is, it's this moment of visionary. What do we want to envision for our future, both personally and collectively? It's a great morning to set those intentions before Mars moves into Aries later today. And then it's going to feel like, okay, we want to take action. There's still going to be 5 planets in retrograde. We've got these squares going, and I can talk about that later, down the road, because this is going to be the conversation all year. But just that's kind of what's up right now. And then we've got the eclipse on the 5th. So,
Well,
okay.
Always such just a really fascinating view that I you've been doing this for a long time, but this is really the first I've explored deeply what those planets mean, and you just give such a articulate vision of that. So thank you.
Thank you. It's time for me to come out of the closet. I was told that when I was 20. I was like, oh, I don't know.
I'm going to push you out of the closet. So, well, okay. Well, thank you for that. So,
Thank you.
um, in keeping with our Transcendence series, and now we're going to go into emotion. And Penny had said something to me about, because while she's not new to these concepts and such, terminologies and such. And so I wanted to explore emotion from the map, from the map of human consciousness. So I am going to share my screen with you and open up the map. And I'd like to start here today with this map, because as we get to the channel, they will reference this, but I personally wanted to start by sharing with you one particular transformation that I went through in understanding emotion and involved in this work that Lily and Teresa and I started doing. And it was the first time that I had this revelation about emotion. Was a session that we did, and it's recorded in diaries, conflict resolution. It was the second big group that we did. And there was one statement, and as it came out of my mouth, my life changed as I heard it simultaneously as I was saying it. And it was a very simple statement, which today is my mantra. But back then it was a revelation. And the statement was, if you are involved in a conflict, the root of your part of that conflict is within you. Now, today, as I said, that is a given in my life. But back then, it was the first time I went, wait a minute, because I was a very angry and victimizing woman. I had a lot of wonderful qualities, but I also was constantly involved in and almost picking fights. And so the idea to me that the root of a conflict that I was engaged in was within me was something I had to really spend a lot of time with. And what did that look like, and what did that mean? And what built on that was the second huge revelation that I had with this work that has also been expounded upon to create this map that we're looking at now, is that this idea that emotion is an energy. We have been given so many definitions of emotions, and we've grown up believing that thinking and having an emotion is talking about that emotion, is feeling it, not understanding the difference between the intellectual energy and the emotional energy and the intuitive energy. So to understand that what emotion is just an energy, so anger is just an energy without a definition. And their definition was, if you say, I'm so sad because my boyfriend left me, then you limit your ability to experience all the sadness that is coming through you in that moment. And the next phase of understanding was when we started to do these groups, and they started to tell us that these were the angels before Einstein, that even the chair at its root had emotion. And that emotion was really the building block of the physical world. So beginning in 1994, all the way to 2020, which is however many years you can count, a couple decades of learning this and experiencing going through conflicts, with real-time conflicts with Lily and Teresa, to understand and use those conflicts as the laboratory to understand, what does this really mean? And through the years, as Einstein emerged afterwards in the late 90s and 2000, when the Party of 12, the first book, came out, and they started to emerge, although they were mentioned in diaries at the very end in the epilogue. So all of that has, through the years, endless learning, endless experimentation, putting it together, has come to this map, which is what Einstein has said is his unified field theory. And also, this is the map of human consciousness. And if we're looking at the macrocosm and the microcosm operating in exactly the same way, which is what a unified field theory has to demonstrate, then what we're looking at here is not just the Earth with the South Pole and the North Pole, but it is the compilation of consciousness that each one of us have at our root. And in this particular picture, the compilation is really this little red, if this is the Earth, in the center of the Earth is this little red dot. Here's my compilation that's creating my lens. And so each of us have a compilation of conscious like this. Compassion as the fifth fundamental force of the universe, which is the intelligence that is using the other four fundamental forces to impel the creation of the physical world one step at a time. So here in this lens is the universe. And here in the center of the Earth, and also in the center of our own particle compilation, is the source, is compassion. And compassion, in its amazing, mysterious, miraculous force, creates something out of nothing, beginning with one, and then it impels that one to split into two, and it impels that two to split into three. And with those three, the Holy Trinity, now comes the ability to have physical infinity. And at the first step into the creation of the physical world is emotion. And I personally think that this revolutionary definition of emotion it's so Einsteinian. It's so worthy of Einstein, because in that primordial soup that is bound up this gravitational wave, headed to become the physical world in the lens, is this emotion, is the chair and the bed and the trees and everything that is going to be in your universe first exists here on this level, capital E, of emotion. It is the fuel that that powers the manifestation of all physical things. And as it's moving up the wave, and the mysterious force of compassion is dividing it now into two, it's taking that step into two. Now sound is born, intuition is born, intuition, the voice of compassion. And because compassion is always impelling the next most advantageous step for the whole plan, for all of that math that's coming up that wave, that's going to be you and your life and your reference frame, intuition is always going to impel us to do what's best for the good of the whole. And it's going to be a push to create the creative force of that compassion. So now we have emotion and intuition are bonding. Emotion is pulling together in form. Here's maybe my physical body pulling together in form. Here's the chair over here. These are pulling together until they're getting to the third, which is intellect, which is the story of what this is and what it's going to be, the definitions. And now they're pulling together into particles. Everything is pulling into form so that by the time they pass through the inner part of the earth and project out into the outer world, inner and outer, it creates a physical body using thoughts, feelings, and senses to perceive. So the body is projecting the chair is coming up the wave, the body is projecting the chair, but also perceiving the chair. And everything in this particle. And back in diaries, in the beginning, they described it as if everybody has their own little spaceship, and they live in this little spaceship world. And from those basic concepts has evolved this entire system. So here I am with my witness also, or you. I just put myself on the map because we called it the honored fourth as well. And this gravitational wave slows down, everything separates out, the body creates that prism which can project and perceive the world, but the wave itself continues on and hooks up with the Earth's electromagnetic domain and comes down back through the North Pole, back into the center of the Earth. And this string is spinning at the speed of light squared. Where the lens of the human intention comes in, it slows it all down to the speed of light so everything can be separated and perceived, and we can have that human experience. And I wanted to, this map can be talked about for days, and I've done that when I've traveled and started at the very beginning and did the whole creation and then interlaid the human consciousness over it. There's so much, and everything so far that I've ever seen can be placed on this map. But this gives us a transcendent view of emotion, as we now can redefine it, not as a feeling up here, and then a thought that about that feeling, that's a very real world, but in the bigger, much greater scientific picture of who we are at this root level, emotion is this force, and it is our direct connection to God. It is what is creating the world. It's the basis of it. Well, the whole system, obviously, but it's the basis of it. So when I experience emotion and thoughts, senses, and feeling up here, where I'm weeping for days, feeling like my mother has just died, with all these thoughts going on, to me, that is one experience. But when I pull out into a position of the observer who is out here looking down on everything, seeing this much bigger picture, I see this emotion as power. Every single wave of it, every aspect of it, the anger, the depression, the joy, the exhilaration, all the emotions that we don't even have words for anymore because they're so deep and they're so complex. And it gives the whole picture, that transcendence that we're talking about, transcendence being living above and outside of the system. And for me, by doing this picture and understanding my life in this way, I begin to understand so much more than just living here in the thoughts, feelings, senses, striving to understand it just from this little bit. But when I pull out and hear the angels or the party say, You don't know what emotion is flowing through you. That could be the emotion of another life and another uh, person who's near you, who you're sharing, you have a connection with. It can be, as I said earlier, that the earth itself, because here's all these spinning strings, and when you don't feel something, it doesn't just go away. It becomes this abscess, which is what all of this red represents. This is emotion that isn't being allowed to move through this string, and is being blocked by intellect saying, well, I'm not mad, or I can't, nope, I'm not going to feel that, and suppressing it. But it doesn't. And this is, I believe, what is happening in this time of COVID, is that this is being forced up. And every single human being, as a thread, as a string, gravitational wave, having this experience embedded in the earth as our mother, cannot help but feel this. Now, how we deal with it when we get here to the lens is a whole nother conversation. But this deep emotion is coming up, and I truly believe the more that we can keep ourselves open and weather those waves by being a vessel, letting our bodies move all of that emotion through us so it can keep going on the wave, we begin to align ourselves to compassion. Because the more we allow ourselves to feel and move that emotion through our body, the louder the voice of God is going to be in our head. Intuition is going to be clearer. And then the third dimension of intellect is where a lot of the hard work takes place. Because when those deep emotions are coming through, they are triggering all of these thoughts. And who knows where they come from? Our childhood, thoughts that are collective consciousness, thoughts of other lives we've had, thoughts of other people. I mean, we are one body here. And so our little human minds are at this point learning how to envelop the bigness of who we are, the expansion. And it's taking a toll. It takes a toll on the physical body, which is why self-care is being stressed so much, and has always been. Well, Lily just was saying she read the self-love was a channeling we did all those many years ago in 94 that has stayed with us ever since, about loving ourselves and taking care of ourselves. And so before we go into the channel, just the last really revolutionary piece of emotion that I've learned through these years is that I can have a deep, intense anger or depression or any other emotion that up here in the thoughts, feelings, and senses we would think or have been told is a bad negative thing. Fear, or there's this whole world of negative emotions but I don't believe that. I believe that that emotion is as powerful a force if it's an anger to create as a joy to create. It is what our intellect is going to define it as that's going to make the ultimate decision about how it's going to manifest. So if our intellect takes that anger and attaches to a story that that person outside us did this and we have to get back at them, that anger is going to create that reality. But if I take that anger and I attach it to these thoughts that I am going to create, that I'm going to be a part of creating the highest form of life on earth, I intend to manifest for the good of all. That anger will fuel that thought into reality as well. That revolutionary idea that you don't have to have all these good feelings and keep the bad feelings down, but instead embrace them all and then prepare intellectually with whatever mantras, whatever you want to call them. I've got mine. I don't need to know why I feel angry. I need to feel it and release it. That's one of my favorite ones. that I just repeat over and over. So that, if I could teach the world anything, it would be that the difference between intellect and emotion and how they work together on this particular model. So, with all of my pontificating said, let us in fact invite the channel in. So let's all take some deep breaths and head out into the heavens for a minute from our observer. And let's look down at this beautiful, beautiful planet. Its blues and its greens and the mountains and the deserts and the oceans and the atmosphere and the clouds. And we can't see one person. It's just one big, beautiful organism that we are all a part of. And the only difference between me and you, all of you, and you and me, is a frame of reference. My physical body has a unique space and time that it takes up that no other physical body can hold. You can imagine my point of view. You can meditate and energetically put yourself in my body, and I can share my space. But your body and my body can never share the same space. But we are the same organism. And the billions and billions of frames of references that are attached to the billions and billions of human beings, the human bodies that had human experiences, thoughts, feelings, senses, emotion, intuition, intellect, the human intention, the gravitational wave, and all that they experienced when their bodies died remains on those spinning strings. So when your body is done, your string continues as a carrier of the information of who that life was in that particular reference frame. And that's why you live on after your body dies. And that's why there is so much abscess in the center of the earth right now that is being released. So look down at that planet. Feel yourself really up there in the heavens. Feel us all together up there in that space that is timeless, that we're familiar with outside of our physical selves. And then look down and see where everyone is. You can see, sort of see the Great Lakes and where Penny and I are, and see Minneapolis there, and Hamilton, Ontario is over there, and Portland, and oh, where is Australia? I don't think I can see it on this side of the world. But as we look at those places where we know we are. I know Lily's down there sitting in Minneapolis, but I can't see her. But let's go there now. Go to your physical body in your room, in your living room, in your bedroom, on Madeline Island or Australia or wherever it is. And now we are in two places at once. We're up in the heavens, looking down in this ethereal, eternal place. And we're also cemented in our bodies, looking out as the projector and the perceiver of the lens of this physical world. And if we continue on into the source, we get into that clarity that the party has been describing, that place before form, that place of source. And so we will command that only the most divine light shine down upon you at this time, and the greatest good be present here. And all that you have generated via conversation today is delighting all of us as well. We may be invisible as far as the physical body goes, but we are greatly here, still celebrating the changes that are happening on the planet right now. And a part of you, that eternal part that is in the source that you are now waking up to and experiencing transcendence to your physical body, that part of you that's with us, you know that this is a joyful change that you're going through. You know on those deep levels that this is bringing exactly what the earth needs. And we want to say that one of the reasons why people are reacting differently to situations that have indeed happened repeatedly over and over is because of the pandemic. The pandemic's effect on emotion is the root of this joy. It's not that we want everyone to feel this suffering. We want to clean out the basement. We want to release the abscesses. We want all of that stored up emotion that's been stored in the earth as long as there have been humans to be released through your bodies, because that is the only way to transmogrify that energy. It is what Jesus actually came to demonstrate when he was placed upon that cross and made to feel a physical pain in a way that could only go through his body. He was so evolved by the time that he got to be the Jesus that was remembered for all of these years for his teachings of compassion, that he did not experience emotion in the same way that you are now. He did not have the confusion about the separation from the intellect and from the emotion and from the intuition. He was born very, very clearly formed in that sense. And because of that, he was able to be an incredible visionary who was able to talk to people at a time on the planet where the physical psyche and deep understanding of psychology and mythology and all of those things had not taken place. Humans were really emerging as life forms. And even though there had been certainly a development through evolution of bringing this intelligence through the species and birthing a human. But at that time of Jesus, 2000 some years ago, he had to figure out a way to articulate to people what this whole system was on every level. And when you hear him speaking in the records that are left in the Bible, he is channeling. You have read his words in the Bible, some of you, over and over to the point where you can quote them. But he just showed up and allowed intuition, which was the voice of his compassion, in such a, he was aligned to compassion in perfection, that he didn't suffer like you suffer today with dealing with your emotions. And part of the plan of having him experience this great physical pain was a kind of cementing of the experience so that it went through his body. So every time that you are faced with emotions that are overwhelming, especially now, because we are emptying out the basement, we are cleaning out the abscesses, know that you are doing the same thing that Jesus did. You're doing the same thing by bearing that pain, and not just bearing it, but understanding the bigger picture of what it is. So the next time any of you, and you will be, lying on your couch weeping, you can allow yourself this full, deep experience that is uncomfortable. Imagine the nails in your hands hanging from a cross for hours. This is uncomfortable. So you're doing that, but you're using higher consciousness, intellectual messaging for yourself to process that emotion in a regenerative way that is aligned to compassion. And our message of alignment to compassion, as long as we've been articulating it that way, has been a very pragmatic teaching about how you as a human being can get to know all these three human dimensions that you are, as if you are taking care of three more organs. You eat healthy to keep your heart healthy. You do things to keep your respiratory system healthy. You do things to keep your skin healthy. Now you do things to keep your intellect healthy. You do things to keep your emotional flow healthy. And you do things to keep intuition first and foremost in the forefront of the impelling movement, decision making of your life, knowing that intuition is the voice of God that you have within you to use and to access. And that voice is your only voice of authority that you ever have to listen to. Now, learning what that means as a human who's coming from the old human structure to this new operating system, it's a learning curve, but this is why you're here. So in transcending emotion, it's not about rising away from it. It's about allowing yourself a bigger vision of the whole, understanding where emotion fits into the system, what its purpose is, and then consciously making adjustments to your own perception, your own point of reference, to include these pieces and parts of yourself in how you experience yourself. We used to do these exercises where we would ask you to, while you're just walking around in a day or being at the supermarket line, if you would imagine you were out in the observer, that you were down in the lens, and then you were also in the source. And people, some people, Barbara in particular, question what was the purpose of this. It's nice to be able to think that we're bigger than we are, and this is the purpose. This is the purpose, is to get you into your body at the same time you are transcending your body, at the same time that you're experiencing the full operating system. So you can be in your body and you see where the body is. It's in the lens. And the lens is the universe for you. And your body is projecting that energy, that gravitational wave that's taking the emotion and the intuition and the intellect and the entire universe and adding free will, giving you the power to make these decisions, coming through this physical body that miraculously, as you're all sitting there right now as we're speaking, this miraculous force of compassion is creating your physical body right now. Doesn't matter the circumstances of your life. It doesn't matter the circumstances of the world. The fact that this energy, this compassion is impelling the creation of your physical body, even as we speak, that alone should be breathtakingly mind-boggling. But you can't walk around all day long just being mind-boggled by the fact that you have a physical body that is creating this entire physical universe. Or can you? How would that affect your emotional relationship or your relationship to your emotion? So in our work with you, we ask you to go to these different places because now you're becoming the whole structure, and you can experience what it is like to have a consciousness, not just in the lens, not just experience your physical body, but experience what it's like in the source before there's thoughts, feelings, and senses, before there's form of emotion, intuition, and intellect, where it's just the potential and the pure compassion waiting to erupt in a gravitational wave, to take that wave to the surface of the planet, to create that physical body, project and perceive, and let that string keep spinning at the speed of light squared. And by doing this, you're inviting yourself to be ahead of your time. You're inviting yourself to be a sovereign entity. By taking control as what is yours to have control of, you become the very change that this planet is creating. And every time you do that in the lens, when you're in your physical body and you're being aware of the greater you and being aware of your thoughts, feelings, senses, and your decision making, and you're making decisions based upon what intuition is telling you, because you don't have to, intellect can get a hold of the whole system, and you have the free will to make decisions that are only going to benefit a very small part of the system. And you do that when you decide you're going to belittle yourself for something, or deny emotion, or do all those egotistical, intellectual kind of tyranny that can happen in that intellect. So every time that you do this, you change the planet. Because look at where that string goes. All the way up through the North Pole, literally through the North Pole, back down through the whole planet, and then up again. You are embedded. The planet is your source. And every time you choose love, you change the whole planet. And right now, this pandemic has brought compassion to the forefront. People need it themselves. It's forcing them to see that they need to have compassion for themselves, because it's very hard to field this emotion. It's opening up hearts, whether you want them open or not, whether your intellect is aligned with the superconscious thinking or not. This is what's happening. And we are here to help facilitate a greater understanding, because we're so excited. And you know us, we have a long view of things. We had a long view of things when we started in 1994. And we weren't afraid to tell you the truth back then, that someday your systems would crash and water would be scarce, and you'd have to get to know your friends and neighbors and learn how to grow your own food and deal with these changes that are happening in your planet. But look look at how they're manifesting for you, for all of you here. Your hard work is paying off now. And more than ever, you become the leaders. That doesn't mean you're perfect. It doesn't mean every day you live some life that's transcendent. You're going through the waves as well. But what better way to lead the world than through the example of embracing your humanity fully? You are human and you are also divine, and you hold the key. So remember about emotion is that it is not just your right to feel absolutely everything that comes through you without having to define it or know where it comes from. But it is your responsibility to begin developing a capacity to feel everything that comes through you. And that capacity is built not just by understanding why it's important to feel all the negative feelings as well in a new way, but capacity is built by taming the wild horses of the intellect and using your witness to actively choose the thinking processes that you are going to use to marry to that emotion. And we tell you what Barbara told you. You can have deep anger and deep depression. And if that emotion comes through that wave and intuition is starting to form around it, and maybe that intuition in its declarative statement is saying, release this anger, release this anger. You can develop intellect and free will to structure that release. And when you begin to find the joy in building that system, this is where you truly begin to transcend. And you've already tasted everything that we are saying to some degree. All of you have used this worldview, this process, to create outcomes that were greater than you could have done going directly at the arena of the conflict. You've created miracles. And they've come and gone. It's not every day has been this fruitful of miracles in your perception. You struggle here and you rise up there. But we say you are about to discover the next level of power that comes with this commitment to compassion. Because when you are working with every fiber of your being for the greatest good of all, starting with self-care, you are creating your slice of the earth to create those miracles we're talking about. You just get out of the way and let your system operate in this way, and then watch and be amazed at what manifests through you, projection and perception in the lens. So we are, as we started out by saying, we're so excited. We're very, very joyful today that you have come together. And we'll say it again. This is about small groups of people understanding, then taking that understanding and using it in their own work, reflected through their own words, their own processes. It's not about following Barbara along or having to do conflict revolution, although we think that the basis of this worldview is as brilliant as we've seen. And we are looking forward ourselves as the next decade comes about for this information to become much more accessible to so many more people are going to be able to understand it, to be able to embrace it. And so many more expressions are going to be able to be made by younger generations who understand things quite naturally. And all the hard, long, sloggy work that you've done through your lives as beings who have come to the planet at this time in your life will seem second nature to these children that are here. And but don't ever think that then that meant you did it wrong, or why did it take you so long. It just is how evolution takes place. It's how evolution happens, and you have to be part of this. And you know, in another few generations, some of you will be coming back to be reborn again into that world that's a few hundred years away. And you will remember. It won't be like when you were born in this life and you had alcoholic parents and you didn't know who you were, or any of the struggles that you went through. It's going to be a different kind of world, but it won't get there. It would never have gotten there without everything that you're doing right here and right now. And let us get down on our knee before you, all of you with your physical bodies who are here, willing and able and passionately becoming this change, bearing this great, great energy through your bodies to be expansive and inclusive and fully aware that you are at your root compassion. So, with all of that said, we would open for any questions or conversations that you would like to have.
I'll ask a question. Well, it's so moving. I have tears in my eyes. Thank you. I've been noticing pain in my body, and it occurred to me in this channel that sometimes blocked emotion might show up as physical pain without really knowing the emotion. So I just wondered if you could speak to that, maybe on behalf of everyone, that as we go through this time, that it actually might show up as physical pain first.
Yes, one very distinct way is showing up as physical pain, and people are experiencing this without any apparent reason. You didn't just climb up on a ladder and paint for 12 hours or what have you. And this is it. It's showing up in everywhere. But what you need to remember about it is, regardless of how it shows up, whether it's a physical pain or whether it's the pain of say George Floyd type of pain, it's showing up so it can be healed. So it isn't something that you're doing something wrong. It's that here's another level of opportunity, of healing that is emerging. And yes, some of it's coming through the physical body, as it always has been. So yes. Then in that case, again, the lessons, the daily lessons are, your intuition will guide you as to how to heal that. And how will you facilitate that intuitive relationship with yourself? So, for example, maybe there's a physical ailment that if you were to go to the doctor would say, really all you can do is rest it for a week. And you go home and you don't want to rest it for a week because it's inconvenient. So inside yourself, there's going to be the intuitive impelling to heal it and transcend it. How well can you hear it? How well can you abide by it? That's the real lesson that's going on with the pain and the release. But you'll see that is also in the macrocosm. And a good example, as Lily was saying, in Minneapolis right now, it's not that that pain isn't real. It's how are you going to transcend it? And right now, societies and communities have a chance as one body to come together in a voice of compassion and find the creative solutions to stop the the kind of abscessing, shall we say, from happening. And so the answer is within each individual, but then it takes place on a community level. You're not just going at the community level. You're letting yourself feel and being guided to then come together as a community to say, how do we find creative solutions for this? And the same with you. I have this. Part of it is the abscess that I'm feeling, intuition. How do I deal with this? What is my best healing processes? And then how will you follow?
Thank you. Any other questions? Feel free to unmute. Joanne, go ahead.
I don't really have a question. I just want to say the same thanks. I've been wanting to cry for a long time and not being able to. So just coming to tears with them on bended knee to us was enough to start me. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you, Joanne. Anyone else? Penny, yes, go ahead, unmute.
For months and months, I have been sobbing and sobbing, wake up from a perfectly good sleep and start to cry before I'm sitting up straight. And it's just been endless. And Kuan Yin, who is my teacher, has said every morning, as I said, for months and months, it's not yours. Allow it to come through. You're helping to give form and shape to the grief that's all around you. Don't grab it. Don't put a narrative on it. Breathe with it. Let it move through. I think that's a very parallel teaching to what Einstein just gave Barbara. It's quite a discipline. It's quite a practice not to personalize it, not to say, oh, this is really because I'm pissed off with my sister and she's so mean. It really has nothing to do with her. And the image, I was interested that he used the crucifixion story because from this, there are two Jesus stories that have been extremely prominent for me. One is, I've spent way too much time in Gethsemane. And the other has been Jesus looking out over the city of Jerusalem and weeping at his beloved city because of what he sees there. And he says, oh, if I could just hold you in my heart. Another sign of this rise of the deep feminine energy of the divine feminine coming through Jesus, not a problem. So those are the two things I wanted to share.
Thank you, Penny.
Yes, and the in terms of waking up and having the emotion move through you, to take that to another step as well as creating an intentional mantra to let that emotion fuel in terms of acknowledgement of the gift that you're giving the planet by keeping your heart that open and keeping your body that open and being willing to bear that emotion through you, and understanding why we say we're joyful today because of it. And that thought in that moment will help to continue to fuel this change forward. Any others?
I have, I think this is more a bit of conversation with you rather than a question. And, it goes back to when we talked earlier about getting something new every single time you look at this stuff. I've been with this map of consciousness since before it was existed, before it was written on paper. I was there as this was created, and still here's something new. So you said the observer or vision is above and outside the system, and here we can see emotion as power, as a power. And then it occurred to me, and here's my first question, the honored fourth then is kind of like the observer when it's still connected to the body in the lens. Is that correct? So it can see more from that position of power, but it is connected to the body, so it still has those encumbrances. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. And it is the honored fourth of emotion, intuition, and intellect. It becomes the honored fourth, which is the observer of those things.
And so when we listen to our honored fourth, sort of the intuition side of things, we get more clarity than when we're caught in the lens. I'm an honored articulation, so I feel often caught in the lens. So all this that you're describing about what's going on for us right now, the question that I wrote on my page was, is this why I can't do anything that is of the intellect right now? Because I am of the intellect, and I mean, all I can do is, I feel like all I can do is keep myself safe. I write every day, but I can't write for anybody else. I can't do my blog post. I can only just be in that space, I guess, of compassion. I don't know.
Yes, and what's happened for you as the prototype, the original honor and articulation, representing the intellect, is that you are adjusting your senses of your physical body to a, when you say compassion, aligned to compassion, which means that your operating system is not now top heavy with intellect. It's fuller, richer, deeper. It has such a huge base of emotion flowing through it, which is something that you haven't let yourself do your whole life.
Right.
And bringing with that is this voice that has always been there, but is so much stronger. And it feels like it's outside you sometimes, and yet it's not. And so, particularly in this time where your intellect in particular has really been taken a beating, because you've let yourself look at what those thought processes are and have had to let them go because they're not serving you, sort of like what Robin was saying. You're letting go of these things that have been very much a part of you and kept you feeling safe or thinking that you were safe, but haven't. So you're stripped of that thing that is your main identity, and you're being forced right now to redefine and re-identify with this whole bigger, fuller, richer, deeper, evolved self that you are. And again, that's part of our joy, is seeing that taking place.
Stripped of, boy, that I can really feel that. It's no wonder I've been spending the last month keeping myself safe, feeling like I need to keep myself safe. And then the last thing I said here fits, it's like the conclusion of what we're saying is, you said that anger will fuel, you know, whatever it is. And so I wrote, this indicates the shift in tone that I'm feeling that's happening, because rather than the anger about what happened to George Floyd just being impotent, that anger literally, it's shifting like what you just described how I'm shifting. It's shifting and it's becoming fuel.
Yes.
That's wonderful. That makes me cry.
Yes, and as you look at, particularly because you're in this sort of ground zero piece today in Minneapolis, being this shift for change, which we've always said that Minneapolis was going to be this place that shifted, and we didn't just mean that because you all three came out of it, but you see the history of righteous anger. You can see how righteous anger has brought change through the years, through the centuries. So that anger itself doesn't become this bad thing. It's how you funnel it. But now each individual is learning this, or being given the opportunity to learn it along with you.
Thank you for that.
Yes.
Can I just add, when listening to you, Lily, talking about anger being fuel, I certainly have used anger that way, and was aware I was using it that way before I knew any of this. I just thought, wow, this is how I'm packing up my house to end my marriage and dismantle my life and start again. I was so angry at everything that was going on. But now I think it's a high octane fuel. It's the high fiber. it's the yeah, accelerated. And I've always remembered when you were channeling the group channel you did up here in Hamilton at the Unity Church, Barbara and Albert et al., that that you were talking about emotion being, it's not just this little trickle of emotion anymore. It's this fire hose of emotion that we're being called to deal with. And so good to learn how to do that and not get drowned in the process.
Yes. And we would akin this to if you think about the history of music, say in the United States, and how during a certain period this type of music was played, and then the period would change, and then this type of music would be played, and through this process, you got the evolution of rock and roll, and jazz came out of the same sort of roots and went their way, and through there were trends in the 70s, the singer-songwriter, and then there was punk, and then there was the 80s and disco. Today there's every kind of music you can ever imagine on every level from every culture at your fingertips. And so it's the same with emotion, is that humans had to learn what does it mean, the anger, the joy, and a lot of what Freud did, good or bad, right or wrong, and the whole of his work. But it was about showing humans that there was this inner world that you couldn't see it, but you could see the results of it. You couldn't see the anger, but you could see the results of it. And then learning how you control it and what it relate. Well, all of that is just completely wide open. And we're going to bring the channel to a close just by saying that you are God. Your physical body is the mechanism that creates your universe and your perspective of it. The piece of God that's in you in the form of intuition will never, ever steer you wrong. Your intellect, however, will do it most every time if you don't take control. But at the core of everything is this beautiful energy of creation, the pure form, the closest that you can get in your body to God is that emotion. It's your right and responsibility. And we want to just tell you, it's a beautiful, joyful awakening that's happening right now. And we have nothing but celebration. And we understand you have challenges right now. You must meet on the earth with those bodies. But if you step into the big picture, you should all have an awe and a humility and a gratitude that you are here, part of this change with such great consciousness. And we're here with you. And that really, every day, the only thing you need to do is watch and be amazed. Namaste.